Hello, I'm in charge of the Instagram tonight. It's all going to get a bit wild. Boop, 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 boop. And we're also on the YouTube. That's already live as well. Welcome, friends, to both. We're about to do some Deceased Git fun times. Where are my pals? There they are. Come on, pals. Come on up. Is it going to work? Let's hope so. Oh,
Hello.
there's two pals. Two pals. A full complement of pals.
We are
for those watching on the YouTube, you might wonder why we do a kind of pause. It's because I'm trying to work out how my phone should work. That's what's happening there.
It always takes a bit longer on Instagram than YouTube because we have to all come on separately.
Yes. You have to grace the stage separately. Welcome. I'm seeing some lovely hellos. Hello.
Yeah, loads on YouTube already. Hi everybody.
And we've got loads of Insta too. Over 90 of you on Insta.
Really?
Jumping up and down, different numbers. Yes. Oh, it's gone back to 86. We're hopping about in terms of numbers.
I've got 15.
Who knows?
Well,
that's weird. It's hopping about all over the shop. Who knows what this may mean? That Instagram's having some technical difficulties. No. Before we get anywhere, shall I just do the things?
Yeah.
Hello, friends.
My comments are frozen
already.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Before you start,
don't touch anything, Catherine.
Don't poke it. No pokey pokes. Hello, friends. Welcome to History After Dark. Whether you're joining us on Instagram or on YouTube, we are knee deep into our Deceased Gits series. Today's Git of choice is Charles Dickens. In a bit, we'll be discussing, no doubt, what we mean by Git. We have plans as well for next week. But before we get to that, it's time for the disclaimer. It's Wednesday. In the UK, it's 8:15 of the evening. It is dark here. We are at History After Dark. That's why we called it this, because we're going to do it at night time. In the summer, it's daytime still, but it's night time now. It also fits because we like our history a little bit dark. That means we want to talk about the historical facts, but we also, while looking at the stars of history, we will lay in the gutter of filth. So there will be smut, there will be swears, there will be innuendo. And if you happen to be in an open plan office with a judgmental boss, then put a headphone in. If you happen to be in a vehicle or at a kitchen table with a child who is a dobber, we call him Timmy. Timmy's a problem. If you happen to be there and you just think that Timmy might go into school tomorrow and ask Miss what some depraved, revolting thing is that we've just said, the stuff that we tend to say to you, don't Google it. If Timmy might go and ask teacher and you might get called at school about it and you don't really want the hassle, then put a headphone in or watch them the playback, either on the YouTube or the Instagram. We will be there unless we say something so reprehensible that it's borderline illegal. It's happened one time before, and at which point we had to yeet that footage into the sun because none of us want to go to jail. We're too pretty. With that being said, that's the disclaimer. Correct?
Can I try coming out and coming back in again on Instagram? Because I can't, this is just crazy.
Have a go.
I don't know how to do it. But
Catherine isn't usually allowed to. She's not usually allowed to press buttons because things go wrong.
Right.
Oh, she's gone.
Well, she managed to go, so we'll see.
She looks concerned. I'm watching her on YouTube, and she looks like she's done a bad thing. I think she's actually done a naughty thing.
Let me take a couple of comments that have come through on YouTube, Colleen. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm here for Dr. Cat's baby microphone. Which Paige just said it's actually not a baby mic. Dr. Cat is 10 foot tall.
I am a literal giant in the world of history.
You are.
Do you know what? We once lied to my husband's little brother that I was a princess of a land called Lilliput. And we were the royal family because we were taller than everybody else there. Everybody else was under 5 feet tall. And for that reason, they made us monarchs. And I'm not sure whether he still believes that. It's possible. It's possible that he still believes it. Where are you, Catherine?
Oh, I can't do it. You need to do it.
Oh, hang on. Where is she gone? How do I do it? Where's she gone?
Put her back down a minute from the comments.
Oh, Lord.
Catherine is going to be telling us about Little Dicky.
Oh, there we go.
Poised and waiting.
Waiting with breath. There she is. There
He
she
didn't let
is.
me request to come back in. I was like, no.
There we go. We're all here.
Right. Sorry, everybody. I just I can't see the comments on YouTube at the minute. And then if I can't see the comments here as well on Instagram, I'm just fumbling in the dark, which often ends
is a way
badly.
to live your life. But wear a condom.
I've missed. This is the best childhood story ever. So I've obviously missed something cracking in my absence. So that's a shame.
Oh, it's just about how we used to lie to my husband's little brother and just wind him up. And the best thing is that his first language is French. So I'm not entirely sure what lie he got told because I couldn't understand all of it because my husband was telling the lie in French. So
Daddy Pig loves to says there's nothing wrong with fumbling in the dark.
Well,
did he?
Consent is key. As long as everybody is accepting, fumble away, friends.
Yes.
Fumble together. Fumble as a group.
Just don't do it in a Tesla.
No.
Oh
my God, I forgot.
360 camera. If you're going to do your dogging, don't do it in a Tesla.
Yeah.
There's a blast.
There's an old one. That's the best.
Yeah, that was
an oldie but a goodie. We have a structure this time, and we are going to go through the motions of that structure. We're going to start at the very beginning because it's a very good place to start with Charles Dickens' early life. I'm going to talk a bit about his career, but mostly I'm going to be slagging him off as a husband. I'll be honest with you. I was supposed to talk about his career more, but I've just gone full rage beast. And then we're going to round the situation off with a convo about this absolute twonk's legacy. In my opinion. I think
we know which side Kat's coming down on already.
If anyone's not sure. Right, that's where this is going. So yes, I'm going to start with
Little Dicky.
I was going to say you think Dickens, and it's just not a good start really for us, is it? Or it is a good start depending on how you want to look at it.
Correct.
Right. So yes, now I have to. No, I will reserve my my thoughts on levels of gittishness for the end because I didn't quite find exactly what I thought I might find. Overall, it was better than I had anticipated, but I also see, yeah. So, Charles John Huffman Dickens. Huffman.
Arrogant level of names. Arrogant number of names, isn't it? Arrogant number of names. To be fair,
both my kids' names are longer than that. I have told them they can change it when they're older, and I was really sorry. So he was born in the naval town of Portsmouth on the 7th of February, 1812. Now, obviously, we all know him as sort of possibly the greatest author of the Dickens of the Victorian era. And something that I thought actually is we use the word Dickensian, and I kind of like to use this really as like an illustration of how we do see him as this really important figure, because the only other, might say Victorian or Edwardian, but they are monarchs. So this is a period in history marked out by a monarch. So it is a little bit different. But when we say Dickensian, we know what we mean, don't we? I mean, I know not everybody's into Dickens, so apologies if you're not, but it creates this illusion of a dark time in society where there was a lot of industrial change, but there was also a lot of poverty. Things were kind of a bit dirty and skanky because of the Industrial Revolution, all the factories and stuff like that. You get the pea soup of fogs, and you get this real image, I think, if we say Dickensian. So I kind of feel like that's sort of a mark of his success in a way, that he's had this phraseology named after him, if you like. So he was born to John and Elizabeth Dickens. He was second son. They had 8 children, and 2 of them died quite young. And as a little boy, he loved reading, which of course he always loved, and playing outside like children do. So maybe a little bit more reading than a lot of children, but certainly there was lots of things that he loved as a child. So his dad was a clerk for the Navy Pay Office. So he was in charge of money, and he would pay the sailors, and this job actually took them around the country. So as a child, Dickens, and his whole family didn't just live in Portsmouth. They travelled around, and he got to live in different parts of England. which possibly helped him with his writing career, but I think it helped him to establish an all-round love for England. It wasn't necessarily just the bit that he grew up in and you know, that he was familiar with, but his dad was quite ambitious and he worked his way up. And so when Charles was 9, they moved to London, settled down, and he got him a place at a private school. So he was getting like a really good education, especially from a family where they, you know, they weren't massively impoverished, but they didn't have a lot of money. So Charles Dickens' dad, so his name was John, and he was very encouraging with his children. He said, you know, you've seen me work and you've seen me rise, and he would take them round, and he took them to a house called Gad's Hill, which I meant to look up about because I can't remember where it was, because I grew up partially in Rochester, loads of Dickens stuff around there. All the shops along the high street are called things like Little Dorrit, A Taste of Two Cities, all things like that. You've got like the, you know, the Dickens Museum and things like that. And he lived up on Fort Pitt Hill and all these types of things. And that means the hill, just in case none of you were sure that hills are higher up. I thought I would just make that clear. And yeah, thank you. And so they were, thank God I'm here. So he would talk them around and he would say to them, you know, look, just because, you know, we haven't necessarily got much money, or I wasn't in a really sort of high job, you look around and you see all this poverty. And there was very much an attitude of, if you're poor, it's your own fault, you deserve it. And so you deserve to be in the workhouse and you deserve to go without. And if you get ill, it's just too bad. And he was like, no, if you work hard, you can achieve, and you can buy a beautiful house and you can enjoy your life. So this sounds fabulous. And it was, because I think it did help him to have this vision later on in his life to be successful. However, his dad imagined all the money that he had rather than actually had it and kind of spent it a lot. And so it gets to a point where he ends up in a debtor's prison for owing over £40, which was a very large sum of money. And at this point, poor little Charlie has to leave this wonderful school and get a job. And he gets a really shit job. In what was the name of the place? A blacking polish factory. So he spends 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, sticking labels on bottles, which is going to be soul destroying for pretty much anybody. But for somebody who had enjoyed being around London, who wanted to be an actor because he was enjoying going to the theatres and watching the plays and putting on performances in pubs and with his brothers, that must have been, and a step away from your education when you love to read, must have been soul destroying. So his dad had to go to debtor's prison, and you can't leave debtor's prison until you've paid your debt. The main flaw of this plan is that there's no way you can clear your debt because you're in the prison.
So you can't work.
So you can't, no one thought that through, did they? And so his family had nowhere to go. So they had to move into the debtor's prison. Now, fortunately for Charles, he went and visited every Sunday, but he had just about enough money. It was only enough, like, oh God, how was it? How much was it? He was earning a few shillings a week, or 6 shillings a week. He was able to afford for himself to have rent a really small room somewhere so that he wasn't in the prison and he could still go out to work. However, he couldn't. How is a lad at that age doing that job? He couldn't earn the money to buy his family out of the prison. Fortunately, but also unfortunately, just suppose depending on their mother-son relationship, John's mum died and she left him some money, I believe that. So he came into this inheritance. I think that's correct. So Charles's grandmother, she got an inheritance. She gave his son an inheritance anyway. So I think she must have died rather than just giving him the money. And that enabled them to buy the family out of the prison. And so at the age of 12, he was actually able to go back into education again, which must have been just wonderful from him. To be able to get back in that environment and going from that awful job. But obviously this made him realise, and this was one of the things he'd realised, that anybody can fall from great. You know, you can be building your way up, you can be doing okay, but it opened his eyes and made him just think, wow, this could happen to anybody. And then once people are in this situation, they're really stuck in this situation. So you saw this attitude coming into his writing. So like Oliver, like Little Dorrit, things like that, where trying to look at people who were in these sorts of situations. So in 1827, he was 15 and he became a junior law clerk for an attorney. And he was really interested in the legal aspects of things, but he would also find a lot of humor in people's really shitty situations, and he would take notes and he would like write about them, make up stories about them, and watch people, like people watch. Basically, he was trying to learn a lot about people all the time. And when, you know, he developed this sort of slightly dark sense of humor, there's two ways you could look at that. One is that it's just like, it was just a git, where it's just laughing at other people's misfortunes. But then other ways, you know, I've worked in mental health nursing, and sometimes you see a lot of dark stuff happen, and the people you work with, you get a little bit light sense of humor about it. It's like a coping mechanism, because I'm sure you must have seen some pretty crappy stuff happening to people, so make of that what you will. Now, when he was 20, because he wanted to be an actor for a while, he had an audition for a play at Covent Garden, but he couldn't attend the audition because he wasn't well. So then you think, well, that's really sad, but if he'd have done that, would he have come on to be a writer? So I think his ambition to act kind of died a little bit then. He became a journalist, and he worked for the Morning Chronicle freelancing, and he loved to sit through and listen to all the cases in the House of Commons. Now, here's some things never change. Okay. He liked to write about farcical courtroom scenes detailing the absurdity of bureaucracy of London judicial purposes and procedures. We'd never have things like that now, would we? Farcical judicial procedures. We'd never have that now. No. But it was here that he met Catherine Hogarth, who I know Kat will talk to you about. He married her. He proposed after 3 months. They married in 1836, and they had 10 children. 10 children. Now that's just crazy. Why would you just no? So that's pretty much it, really. I talked about how we have this view of Dickensian Britain. He pretty much wrote about it like that, the Victorian era, but he wanted England to be better. So I think people look at it in different ways, but I kind of feel a bit like I'm taking him a bit less gittish here, because I felt like he observed the fall from grace, the exploitation of people for cheap labour for the Industrial Revolution, the lack of healthcare, the suffering, the dirt, and just like that. And he wanted England to be a better place. And he felt that his contribution to this would be as a social and political commentator. So that is my early Dickens. He has just got married. I know this bit's going to go, that particular element is going to go less well, but so far, I quite like him. So far,
right? Don't get attached.
Don't get.
So I'm gonna reverse a little bit. So we've got this. He's working as a freelance journalist from the late 1820s, and around the same time, he meets his first love. He falls madly in love with a woman called Maria Bednall, and he is just essentially impassioned with her. Maria comes from a relatively prosperous family, which at this point, as we know, Dickens does not. But this, in addition to perhaps his better aspirations, he thinks that by improving himself and getting himself back up the rungs of the ladder, he's going to get his end away with some top quality tale. So he does things like he goes to the British Museum and goes to the reading rooms, so the sort of the British Library rooms of the day. He starts reading Shakespeare and the classics and English and Roman history. This is all just after his 18th birthday, and this is one of the things that also inspires him. He thinks he has a great talent for acting, and as you said, he goes to this audition at he's about to go for this audition at Covent Garden, but he has this bad cold,
flu.
Well, I mean, that being said,
Old
women get very sick and ignore it, and they're actually really sick. So maybe we should just be like, if men say they're sick, they're just probably the appropriate amount of sick. But because we're told to suck everything up, we will happily go around with walking pneumonia. So it's not healthy.
No, that's a good idea.
But yeah, so he's attending the audition, and then he get his journalistic career develop. So in the 1830s, he's getting these short stories and serialized tales published, both comedic and not comedic, in addition to doing factual correspondent work. So he goes out into the streets and sees what's going on and all that kind of stuff. But at this point, still, the celebrity that he's going to enjoy in the future is a fairly distant past. As you say, in the middle of the 1830s, he's turned away from Maria. He's realized that she's not the woman for him. She's blown hot and cold, and he has met the beautiful, talented, intelligent, funny, wonderful daughter of a magazine editor. The man is George Hogarth, and we are, of course, talking about Catherine Hogarth. As you rightly say, they were engaged in 1835. This courtship, though, does not follow the traditional rules of Victorian England. At the time, like it or lump it, it's not emotionally healthy, but a lot of Victorian England wasn't emotionally healthy. There is a kind of gameplay among affianced couples, whereby a woman will essentially teach her man how to treat her by withdrawing affection, by pretending to not respond to his letters, by keeping him dangling. It's super emotionally unhealthy. Don't get me wrong, but it is the traditional gameplay of the time, because let's be clear, when she gets married, she's going to have bugger all power. So this is a chance for her to get it. Charles Dickens is having absolutely none of this. And when he thinks that because he is working all the hours that God sends, it's making her annoyed, and she is therefore essentially kind of withdrawing a little bit because she's a bit pissed off, he basically goes off on one. It's like, I thought you were better than this. I thought you were, essentially, I thought you were grown up. How dare you? How dare you have a problem with me working all the hours that God sends? How very dare you? He also thinks that she needs training in how to be a good wife and appropriate timekeeping. So he gives her the wonderful opportunity, lucky her, to come and cook him breakfast. And he makes it very clear in the invitation. She invites him over to come and cook him breakfast. And basically, it's about making sure that she can be there on time. So for some reason, she goes off with that and says, yes, that's a perfect idea. They marry in 1836. In the same year, the serialization of the Pickwick Papers just become this runaway success. So almost at the time of them getting married, Dickens's fame starts to grow.
Irish Birdie 35. What a knobhead.
Correct.
Do you know what, though, as someone who thinks breakfast is incredibly important, I'm actually thinking I'm siding with him here. If you want to be my beau, get breakfast done on time.
Fair. However, married life, even at the very start, is not necessarily as it should be. Dickens, once again, does not react like a normal Victorian husband. There is this, once again, I don't think it's super healthy. There is a perception that the woman's job is a domestic one. The wife is the ministering angel of domestic bliss. That the man goes out and works at the coalface, whatever may it might be, whether that's the literal coalface or, the printing press or etc. That in doing so, he must come home to a beautiful abode with rosy-cheeked children and a plump buttocked wife, etc. And so she will she will choose the finest wallpapers that at the Victorian period and the Edwardian period are, of course, laced with a shitload of arsenic. Super good for the health. The children will be playing with their lead. Walls? Well, the damp would kick off the dust. They would breathe in arsenic. So nice. Arsenic green wallpaper was incredibly popular. Arsenic was used to dye clothes green. It was used to dye curtains green. It was used in all sorts of things, and it was super fucking fatal.
Beautiful
colour, so it's beautiful, but it will definitely
kill you. You can't appreciate it when you're dead, though, can you?
No.
Spoils it a bit.
But not so in the Dickens house. At first, there was a parity, but very quickly he starts to take very close ties of the purse strings and the aesthetics. He thinks he knows best. So he will choose the wallpaper, he will choose the furniture, and she will make it fit. And he will have all control over the money. None of this is normal. This is a level of control that is unexpected. But there we go. The first instalment of Oliver Twist appears in 1837, and then between 1837 and 1841, in addition to Oliver Twist, Dickens also produces Barnaby Rudge, Nicholas Nickleby, and The Old Curiosity Shop, which I think are some fairly well-known texts. Clearly, there is a level of success happening. Home life, however, is a more mixed bag. Catherine has their first child, Charles Culliford Boz Dickens, interesting name, in January.
Did they hate him already?
Well, in later years, Charles, his father, will complain that his son has inherited his mother's temperament, and that won't be flattering.
It's not a compliment. No.
Not a compliment. And so they moved to a new house in Doughty Street, which is now the Charles Dickens Museum. Staying with them is Catherine, his wife's younger sister, Mary Hogarth. She dies on the 7th of May, 1837, and she's only 17, and it throws the household into disarray. Obviously, this is his wife's younger sister, so she's bereft. But weirdly, it's Charles Dickens who really, really, really feels this as his personal grief. He composes an epitaph for her, young, beautiful and good, that sits on her tomb in Kensal Green. He suspends writing of both the Pickwick and Oliver Twist for a month. He writes that he had lost the dearest friend I ever had. This is a 17-year-old girl, his wife's sister, dearest friend he ever had. One who, quote, sympathized with all my thoughts and feelings more than anyone I ever knew, ever did or will. He declared also, I solemnly believe that so perfect a creature had never breathed. Like this overweening grief about how sad he was. But what's amazing is he complains about how Mary and Catherine's mother deals with the death. So he praises his wife for talking about, essentially for not showing her sadness, for controlling herself and maintaining her composure. But he definitely thinks that his mother-in-law is going too far, because the only person who can show overweening grief over the death of this girl is clearly him. Let's be clear, hypocrisy is this man's favourite fucking cologne. Sorry, the rage is getting him. Right.
I think Dickens was banging the little sister of his wife for sure.
Hold on a second.
I had to be tagged in that.
hold on a second, because my friends, we're going to get there with a different sister. Catherine has more sisters. Let's hold fire. There's actually no evidence that he was fedoinking Mary. She was there to help with the children and the household. This very busy man who keeps bringing in fucking furniture for his wife to deal with. So she's dealing with this zealot. Anyway, it doesn't get better. 1842, Charles Dickens decides that he needs to go on an American tour.
Oh, yes.
Capitalize. So 1842, the couple go to America on a publicity tour. The decision is made to leave the children behind. By then, there are 4 children. Catherine is not keen on leaving her tiny little children behind, and it's suggested that her husband deliberately fudged the dates regarding how long they'd be away so that Catherine would capitulate and go. So it's actually a 6-month trip. Oh. When they return, their eldest son, little Charlie, who's aged about 4 or 5, apparently suffers some form of nervous collapse at seeing the parents that he had so clearly missed, and probably, as he was so young, thought were never coming back. As it was, Charles failed to win over the American audience because they found him to be snobby and mercenary. I wonder why. Back in England, Catherine's 15-year-old sister, ding, 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 comes to live with the family. She's there to support this busy patriarch with so much work going on and his growing brood. The couple's 10th child is going to be born in 1852. But Catherine is not idle either. The previous year, 1851, Catherine Dickens publishes her own work, which no one talks about. In fact, when they do talk about it, they claim that Charles Dickens secretly wrote it and used, for some reason, his wife as a ghostwriter underneath a female name, because that's so famously how things worked, isn't it? So famously, men use the names of women to hide who they really are. Famous male authors definitely do that all the time. Anyway, Catherine publishes a household manual in the manner of a Mrs. Beeton. In fact, she's earlier than Mrs. Beeton, so she precedes Mrs. Beeton. And Catherine's text is called "What Shall We Have for Dinner?"
Oh, I
Now,
like
Breakfast.
it. Well,
Brinner. What shall we have for Brinner? So at this, of course, Charles has kept on publishing, in addition to continuing his journalistic
So
commentaries.
I think he was pretty busy anyway.
He was
He was
busy.
doing a
He
lot
was-
of writing.
He was busy neglecting his family. The first part of Martin Chuzzlewit emerges at the very end of 1842. 1843, we get A Christmas Carol. We get Dombey and Son starting to be released in 1846. And then we get the first part of David Copperfield in 1849. And then if we looked at 1851, the year of What Should We Have for Dinner, even with this work and this publication, she does seem to have struggled somewhat, perhaps mentally, which may be a part of having all these bloody kids and a husband who keeps leaving and trying to trick her into going to America. I mean, I would be best pleased. So he deposits her in Malvern, where there are some, I think, healing springs.
Malvern.
Malvern. Just chew on. That's a chewy word, isn't it?
That's near me.
I call it Malvern Spring. Is it not? Is it Malvern?
No, it's Malvern Springs. Yeah.
Oh, right. So they have bottled
There you
water.
go. Woo, I've taught Kat something.
Thank you. Malvern Spring, which to me tastes of pennies, but I think it's probably delicious. So she's deposited there with her sister Georgina. This sister was living with them, so that she could try the water cure. And at this point, Dickens is visiting her. 51 is a bad year. Dickens's father John dies, and also his Catherine and Dickens's 8-month-old daughter also dies. So Catherine has to be brought back from the water cures, and at this point Charles does show some compassion. The person who sent to fetch her home, he did essentially say, "Can you be kind about it? Just tell her that little Dora is seriously ill and was not expected to survive," rather than saying your kid's dead. So in this letter that he sends to Catherine, there's this sort of concern for her, but also we're seeing a repeat of the commandment not to give over into grief, the things he praised her for after her sister's death, that he doesn't want her to give way into this sort of grieving for her baby. The 1850s are a decade where Dickens is increasingly anxious and angry about the social and political condition of England, the things he's witnessing as a journalist, and he's really starting to give it full voice in his writings. What I will say is that, unlike the suffragettes that will come later, he is very much a words not deeds kind of a person. Like, he'll do all of the complaining. He will make interventions into politics. He will join things like the Administrative Reform Association, but he was invited to stand for Parliament more than once. So he was invited to occupy a position where he could actually have affected real change in the lives of people who he recognised and he saw through his journalistic endeavours actually suffering. But rather than do that, why not just write about them and profit from their misery? Anyway, so he is very much anti-government. He talks about how they are allowing the poor to suffer. It certainly inspires the novels of the decade. We have Bleak House, published monthly. We have Hard Times, which is, I studied that at GCSE, very famous scathing account of education systems and poverty. And then we have Little Dorrit as well. It's clear that he is depicting and showing outrage and deep concern about how those at the very outsides of society, those very risked people, are being woefully let down by their government. But what I will say is he could have potentially have got himself into a position where he could have changed that. Additionally, he is concerned about his home life. He seems to start to resent the family that he's built. He seems to resent his wife, Catherine, for it as well. He starts to complain about her capacity as a wife and mother. He starts to resent her for giving him so many children. He starts thinking about, his own childhood and how all of these kids is a way that poverty comes, as if somehow that's her fault, like he didn't lay down and make those babies with her. He starts to intimate that she's maybe a drunk, maybe mad. There's some indication that he might have seen whether he could get her committed or not. All the while, ding a ding a ding ding ding, he is reveling in the attentions of a pretty young actress called Nellie Ternan. Nellie was the same age as the couple's youngest surviving daughter. So she was some 27 years Charles's junior. Rumours of this relationship make the press, possibly put out there by his mother-in-law and older sister-in-law. Dickens is mortified. He in fact enjoins his mother-in-law and sister-in-law to write a message that can go out in the press, essentially taking back the fact that he's definitely doinking this actress. And to make good on it, he then decides to properly sling some mud about. He kicks his wife out, sets her up in a house in North London with only her son. Her sister Georgina, however, chooses to stay with Dickens. So Catherine and her son go with an income of £600 a year in a house in northwest London. He seems keen to set a situation where Georgina is beyond reproach, although everyone is questioning whether they may have had a relationship too. Then, in the press, it starts off as a New York Tribune piece, and then it migrates over to England. A letter that had been written by Dickens to somebody called Arthur Smith. He's the manager of his public readings. In this letter, he talks about how his wife has no real love for her children, nor they for her. He hints at her having mental instability. Essentially, it's a letter that completely desecrates her as an individual and a mother and a wife. Dickens always says he never intended this letter to be published, that he was violated, but stayed friends with the guy who he sent it to, who must have leaked it. So seems to me that he was very keen on that letter making the light of day, and perhaps that's the reason that he wrote it. He becomes incredibly hostile to Catherine. He decides that he can no longer communicate with her, and he will only write to her for the rest of his life. He writes to her just 3 times, and it's always in response to her letters to him, and it's usually a terse, unfeeling response. In the aftermath of separation, he goes on. He keeps writing. Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, Our Mutual Friend. He makes a living by travelling around doing dramatic readings of his work. So the boy who was auditioning in Covent Garden is now swanning about with his histrionic dramatics, no doubt ideally suited to this line of work. He even does make a second run at an American tour, 1867 to 1868. This is more successful, despite the fact that there are issues with ticket sales, people touting tickets, and there's also the American press is still going for him after the last time. However, he turns out such great performances that the amount I've seen is that he gets £19,000. Unfortunately, he doesn't trust American currency, so he demands that it be transferred into gold, which does require a 40% discount.
Oh dear, so he's got his father's sense with money then.
Well, yes, he wants shiny gold, but not American dollars. Dickens begins his final novel soon after his return. This is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. The first instalment of that is released in April of 1869. Dickens passes away the following June, 9th of June, 1870, and the final novel, as it's being serialised, is left unfinished. Dickens is survived by Catherine, and she would live for 9 years after his death. And this is it. This is it for me. This is the bit for me that makes me want to reach back through time and grab him by his self-satisfied face and poke him in the eye. As she lays on her deathbed, she says to her daughter, "Send my letters from your father to the British Museum, so, quote, that the world may know he loved me once." The man is the devil. I rest my case.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't. There's a lot in there, and it's. I mean, like for instance, his trip to America. The reason he's at odds with the press is that they have been publishing his works without any compensation to him whatsoever. That's how he starts getting into arguments with them. So yeah, they're going to be gunning for him because he was gunning for them, and they refused. They said that he should be grateful for his fame. And he doesn't need any like monetary compensation for them publishing his works in America. He finds this out the first time he goes. But your point about being an MP, when he goes to America, he's appalled by the slavery there. But like you say, he doesn't come back and he's not an MP in our parliament. However, does he need to have been to affect change? His work reached more people of more social classes than anyone else by the serialization of his work. That was genius. Absolute genius. It made it affordable because each week an installment, or each month, some of them an installment would come out, and it's affordable. It's, you know, and they would be read out loud in pubs. So actually the reach would become even further, go down to people who may not even have been able to afford that. He's raising social issues that people may not have been aware of, and in a way that they're going to care, because there's an emotional draw, because you've got characters in there who he's basing on people he knows half the time. I think his mother is the basis for somebody, isn't she? In one of the novels, she doesn't recognize it, thankfully for him. You know, so actually I would argue he did more by doing that than he would have been able to do as a sitting MP, because he can influence. You know, you've got plenty of people today who are just trying to influence people. You know, they can do more than having to sit, because once you're in somewhere like the House of Parliament, you have actual politics involved in what you're actually able to do. Whereas if you're outside of that, you've got more of a freedom, especially if you're a fiction writer and you can serialize and, you know, create these characters that are going to be able to tell the real stories. And Catherine, you said about him sort of having a comedic view of a situation, but again, aren't some of the best sort of social commentators those who can deliver it with a sense of humor that means it's accessible and it doesn't scare the shit out of you, so you can actually listen to it for a bit longer? Yep. So, you know, I think there's actually quite a lot going for him. I mean, the amount of work he puts out as well. He's a prolific writer, clearly, and enjoys it. How he kept track of everything, I don't know. But and the way he could, so apparently he would take feedback. So he would be listening. It's a bit like well, no, actually, I suppose episodes of series that come out now are already filmed and scripted. Although I suppose that things like EastEnders and your soap operas are adapting all the time, but he would adapt his story. So he would be listening to feedback and, you know, are characters believable or are they not, or blah, blah, blah. And he might adapt it so that he could take that feedback, which I think is really clever. But yeah, so I think there's lots actually going for Dickens, and he did have to cope with I mean, we think of him sort of, or I was thinking that he rose you know, up sort of from the pits, you know, up to kind of levels of stardom and richness, but because he didn't, he was fairly okay, and then finds that overnight, which is a theme of a lot of his work, isn't it? Through no fault of his own, yeah, his dad might have been a bit silly, but debtor's prison, really, like Catherine says, what the hell is that supposed to actually do? It's not an alternative to you being able to pay your debts. It's a punishment. It's just a prison. It's for owing people money. And he suddenly finds himself in there, sees his dad in prison. He's there for like 3 months, and yet however many years later it comes up as the prison in Little Dorrit. It's clearly stuck with him, so that's had an impact, and he becomes, in his own lifetime, compared second only to Shakespeare.
Yeah,
that's, how would any of us, think about stars now? Did they cope well with that kind of rise to influence? No, half of them start thinking they can tell us how we should be living our lives because they suddenly have a voice, and apparently that qualifies them. And I don't see that it's probably much different to him, except he had actually experienced a lot of what he wrote about, even if he wasn't experiencing it at the time that he wrote about it. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said for him. He would be quite generous. I think he had something about food and drink, being able to actually get hold of food and drink. I think that was something that might have stuck with him from that time in poverty and his time scraping together. He would put on parties for friends and family. He was obsessed. I think he was really keen to provide, for people he liked. And I think there were family members who he supported for quite a long time. I don't think
sister-in-laws mostly.
Well, maybe sisters-in-laws, but they were of course living with him. So he's got most definitely questionable characteristics. I mean, someone I was listening to talking about him said, "What do you think? Maybe he was on the sort of psychopathic sort of spectrum, if there is such a thing, because he was incredibly good at writing emotions and invoking emotions in the reader. You really cared about his characters. Was he, like psychopaths are, able to understand emotions even though they can't feel them? Was he some way, shape or form in that? And then just an interesting tidbit that I found out was he was a really good conjurer. Did you know that? He liked to entertain.
Know that.
He was a conjurer, so he learnt conjuring. Yeah, he really enjoyed it. And I think, like, back to maybe being this wannabe performer as well. So yeah, he loved doing conjuring. He would do that at his parties. And once he which was the work Dombey and Son was the one that he first started reading to friends. And that gave him the idea of going out and doing sort of reading gigs and reading what do you call them? Not episodes. What do you call installments? I don't know what you call them. Yeah. So he clearly sort of enjoyed that kind of interaction with an audience as well, and entertaining. So I think there's quite a lot to be said good for him as well, even if he, relationship breakdown. They happen.
He was a wanker at home, but he did some good shit. The other thing is,
don't they?
If he'd have become an MP, that possibly would have taken up so much of his time that he wouldn't have done as much writing.
I don't think he'd done much writing, and I don't think he'd have been at home anymore either.
Yeah. So then I'm thinking, well, if he was reaching so many people with his writing, I get the argument that he could have gone into Parliament and maybe he could have been part of, like, because we were going to talk about the poor law, weren't we? And he could have perhaps made some real change, but he was one person in a society full of other knobby people. The other people in Parliament would have been the people who went, we don't give a shit about the poor people. The poor people deserve to be poor because they're this and the rest of it. So he may have been a lone voice. So it could have been that he didn't quite care enough because he was making money from writing his plays and giving it, But then it could also at the same time be that sort of level of realism of, if I go in there, what can I achieve? I've only got so much time, so I can do that, or I can carry on writing. And he did reach big, and there was, I can't remember what I was reading, but sort of some sort of evidence that he was affecting some of the opinions and the ideas of people who were further up in the social strata about this.
I mean, Victoria read him.
Yeah,
Victoria read him, and it possibly attuned her to some awareness that there were people. Like, let's be clear, his discussion about the evils of the workhouse and his discussion about the evils of things like debtor's prison were vital for changing hearts and minds. But I don't think he was doing it out of the goodness of his heart, because he was very keen to make as much profit by serializing it as he possibly could, which is, he's entitled to do, but it's not a charitable endeavor. Put it that way.
No, but I don't think he ever pretended it was supposed to be a charitable endeavor. That was his living, and you can see it in his character of you tell me and I'll tell you. Christmas Carol, come on.
Scrooge
starts off. Yeah,
You tell me
sorry.
and I'll tell you.
Yeah, I've done a lot today. Yeah, Scrooge starts off.
Had a busy week.
Poor, and he is determined to never be poor.
Mm.
And maybe I think there's a lot in his writing that could be seen as autobiographical, leaning heavily on his own experience. I think it was Kath just asked, when did he become famous? But I think he became famous from the beginning, didn't he? The Pickwick Papers was his first, but
Sort of
Oliver
runaway
Twist
success,
was his second. So the Poor Law, which is the one that brought in these awful ideas of debtors' prison and workhouses, had been brought in 1834. He writes Pickwick Papers, begins to write them because they're serialized in 1836, and Oliver Twist in 1837. So really, he's getting quite quickly onto it.
Yeah, he does. You're absolutely right. He, like, in his writing, I'm always concerned about kind of biography being used to understand a writer's work, but I do think that there's an element to that of Dickens, because he puts people that have usually pissed him off in his work in very unkind caricatures.
I love that though.
I mean, yeah,
we would do the same.
That's what we do. So.
Yeah.
Fair point. But I think what you see in his work is you see a person who, like you rightly say, Philippa, is terrified of being poor again. But also, I think that clearly that poverty came with hunger. Like the detail of food in these books, the constant reference to food, the almost orgiastic way in which food is discussed and represented and becomes a focus, it comes across as somebody who has really known hunger. I think, and I have no doubt that your father, when you're in your mid to late teens, your father and family being placed in a debtor's prison when you have been going to a fine school and everything looks great and this comes as a shock, must have been an incredible trauma. I don't doubt that. But misery doesn't have to love company, Charlie. And you didn't have to be such a dick to your wife.
We don't know what she was like, to be fair, do we? Do we really know what she was like? She might have been a pain in the ass.
Well, she was just absolutely bloody knackered. She had 10 kids.
Yes, she would have been knackered.
According to his account, she's this feckless drunk who can't keep the house clean. But
she's probably having a breakdown. Can you imagine oh goodness me, the postnatal depression after 10 children and the loss of the baby as well, and there were at least 2 miscarriages. Like, he liked her enough, put it that way.
Yeah, that's
he
true.
liked her enough, but he liked diminutive, slim, small women. And the actress Nellie, he sets her up in a house, her family, so he's funding all of this as well. So as well as keeping on his wife's sister, and he keeps his daughters around. The boy goes to live with his mum. His eldest son chooses to live with his mother.
Yeah, he's not great.
She can't have been all bad.
No. I'm sure
she can't have been all bad. He's nice to his daughters, right. But clearly the son chooses her. So she can't have been this, as he calls her, a woman who has no affection for her children. Her children have no affection for her. Her son does.
That sounds like a kick out, doesn't it, at somebody who is trying to justify his own actions by putting her down.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think being married to him would be a barrel of laughs.
No. I also don't think working with him would have been a barrel of laughs either. I mean, like, I totally get that having your work serialized in the States without your consent and without being funded, I totally get that that's legally actionable. But a smart person...
he did try and go down the legal route.
I'm going to go in with an in-joke here between just us three and possibly one person in the audience. Isn't it terrible when someone tries to take credit for your work?
Yes.
If anybody's
Yes.
going to ask us to explain that, don't
Yeah, we're
bother
not
because we
going
ain't
to.
telling
We
you.
It's, I think,
Yes, I think he does,
I
but because
think,
it's in America, he doesn't get anywhere. He goes down the copyright route, and
yeah.
and then of course it's the press is always going to be, and they can write what they like, so they're going to be putting him, shedding him, you know, in a bad light. So
Yeah. However, I think, you know, the second time around, the America trip
It was quite successful, wasn't it? Well, didn't that equate to like over £1 million in today's money? Had he not had it,
not after he, yeah, not after he had it in gold.
After that's £3.50 after that. But yeah, it was certainly.
If you ever want to do
keep
your
all those other women in different houses, then you need that kind of cash.
You do. If you ever want to do a kind of figure out what the value of something would be in today's money, this is a side note, but it's a cool source.
I love
people
this.
Look into it.
Yeah.
National Archives have got a currency converter. If you Google National Archives currency converter, it will come up with a search engine. In most cases, it's by decade. Sometimes it's by 50 years, but it's by decade. And then you put in the amount that's quoted, and it tells you in 2017 money what it's worth in pounds, what it's worth in horses.
Yeah, but it says how many horses you can buy.
What it's worth in a skilled person's labour, that kind of thing. So yeah, if you want a kind of rough idea of what things cost,
it's very good.
Lottie Rose, he's like a small bit of a bellend.
I mean, it's definitely there, but
for me, the treatment of his wife is just in the same way, like Charles Brandon is not
another of Cat's faves.
Oh, for Christ's sake. It's not a kind of run-of-the-mill, murderous fuck. But, my lord, he is shitty. He's a shitty person, and he treats the women in his life poorly, and he's a fucking user. Apparently, Wilkie Collins, who I know nothing about, was the same.
He was his co-writer, wasn't he, on the play that Nelly that they met? Yeah, Frozen. Oh God, what was it called? I wrote it down somewhere. But yeah, that was his co.
So birds of a feather flock together.
Frozen Deep.
Yeah,
you can always tell a lot about people by the company they keep.
Oh fuck.
Yeah,
sucks to be us.
Yeah, I do think it's hard though, but when you look at relationships, because you don't know, and relationships that you think are doing well break down all the time, and then you find out there's stories you don't know about, the person you assume is the wrong, the hard done by one. So I don't know.
Well, the narrative was, until very recently, that Charles was the hard done by one. The narrative was that he had fallen madly in love with this woman, and that he'd had 10 children by her, and she just let herself go, and she didn't keep the house, and he had to move her sister in, and he had to keep his daughter around to keep the house because he's such a busy boy. Such a busy boy.
Dude, I mean, keeping a house with 2 kids on straight. It's hard. 10. Can you imagine the things you put them down and they just turn up somewhere else with mud on them?
And it's sort of presented like even the thing, like when people in the past, when they would talk about this book that she's supposed to publish, there was people talking about how she was illiterate. There's no way she was illiterate. Absolutely no way she was illiterate. For a start,
well, they wrote to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
He wouldn't have even married her in the first place if she'd been illiterate. No. Clearly,
and, she's the daughter of an editor in late Georgian Victorian England. Like she's well educated. She has the accomplishments of a upper middle class girl. That's expected to keep house, to keep the books, to do all of that kind of stuff. So he does everything he can to shit on her memory. Also, like in terms of keeping a house, they are of a level of affluence that there would be an expectation there would at least be a maid of all works. At least a maid of all works. Georgina should have been there for company.
Yeah,
Like,
they
she
must have
shouldn't
had
be-
staff, surely. I mean, he's not poor by this
A
point.
woman
He's
like
poor.
Catherine Dickens is not going to be elbow deep in her own laundry. That's not going to happen. She's not going to be there out of the hearth, boiling at the copper, doing her own laundry, doing her smalls. That's not what Catherine. She has tea with the neighbourhood women while the maid of all work does the graft. She isn't beating out bed mattresses. She's Catherine Dickens. So yeah, this kind of thing of like, if the house is poorly kept, maybe it's because you won't let her have any autonomy over it, or any access to the money, mate. Maybe that's why.
Oh yeah, you
sod
definitely need
off,
money if you're going to
you
be
twat.
keeping.
There's some horrifying numbers of children coming
I know,
up.
I'm seeing
on
people have had-
Instagram.
Oh,
Jules
boy.
my great grandmother was one of 21 children. Holy mother of
That's a
all
lot of babies.
things Christ-like.
Yeah,
That's being
no,
pregnant.
that's a nope.
That's got to be being pregnant for pretty much the entirety of your married / fertile years. 21 that's got to be, you're pregnant every year.
I mean, there could have been
year.
multiple births in that, I suppose, but it's still a bit much if we're being honest.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be up for that personally.
Lacey Gordon says that Dickens was a bit of a gaslighter. He would tell friends he was in one place and then be sneaking off to another place. No one knew where to find him.
although but again, he's in like the probably first throes of celebrity culture where you actually are recognized in the street. Does he not want to have some privacy? Does he not want to maybe not have people know where he is every minute?
But should you probably not tell your wife?
Why? Well, I don't know, but that's not what
when you can get privacy at home with your wife and kids.
Not quiet. You cannot. You cannot get quiet at home with 10 kids.
No, but you can have a private life at home with your wife and kids. You haven't got to be in the arms of Nelly.
You can tell you're in a very happy relationship, Kat. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Tara, buy a hat and rather than have a beard, shave your beard off, and then buy an enormous moustache.
Buy a false moustache.
Great, well, it's great big
glasses.
ones.
But he didn't exactly. I mean, he wasn't really well kept. I don't think kept.
I mean, I think there are authors who have some really shadier stuff. Like, maybe at one time we will talk about Lewis Carroll, because I have issues with that man. Big issues.
I'm trying to think who we've got for L, and I know who we've got for L. Delve in it with that one, because I'm the only one who knows anything about him, and it's quite complicated. So maybe we could swap him.
Oh, there you go.
Well, Lewis Carroll's a problem. Lewis Carroll is a problem.
Are we going to have? Do you think there's a level of like the sort of the because he's clearly talented. Like, is there a level of kind of mental
are we getting
instability
into
with someone
so
like
you get
this?
to a certain point and you can become a bit of a bellend?
No, you don't become it, but that's sort of part of the entire person.
Does genius is it wrapped up in
kind of a
borderline criminal personality?
Well,
maybe just a little bit, narcissistic kind of like
something that is not a desirable personality trait.
I mean, I don't. There have to.
You have to be a bit mercenary to. Who's seen Coco? Like that dude from Coco.
Is that a Disney thing?
Yes.
No, I have not seen it.
The guy who sings "Remember Me," De La Cruz. So his thing is very much you do whatever it takes. It doesn't matter what it is. You do whatever it takes to get to the top and be successful. It doesn't matter what you sacrifice, who you sacrifice. The only way to be successful, which works really well until he gets crushed by an enormous bell. Spoiler alert.
Oh, okay. There you go.
The cartoon. So that's what's happened.
Great film, Coco. If you've not seen it.
I think the kind of the psychology of success is a very interesting one, and I think also the psychology of success is changing, and the combination of social media and capitalism and me culture means that in effect, and there's a psychologist that says this, and I agree, that the way to be successful today is to be a narcissist, like clinically.
We reward narcissism.
Yeah.
Mm.
Not personal life. It's a bad time.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering where when that kind of acceptance, that genius came with behavioral problems that were acceptable because of the genius. Like, when does that start? I mean, back in the Jacobean, Elizabethan Jacobean theatre, Christopher Marlowe is interesting. Ben Jonson kills a man. William Shakespeare isn't a great husband. He fucks off to London and leaves Anne Hathaway in Stratford.
We've no idea what he does.
No idea. Just leaves his missus up there. It's like, see you later. Bye. So is there a combination? Is there something in which genius requires a level of selfishness that's almost personality disordered?
I think the selfishness thing is possibly there. But then, there are so many hours in the day, and if you're going to be producing this amount of work, it has to be done. And we all run our own businesses. Ideally, I wouldn't be working as many hours.
Oh, you've muted.
Do. So my son. See, I have mothering duties as well, all times of the day of night. There is so many hours in the day, and if you're going to be productive, you have to use them, and you do have to be a bit, if you can, a bit selfish and protective of those hours, I would say.
Yeah.
It's very hard. It's an impossible balance, it feels like.
Yeah. So we're at 1 hour, 6 minutes, ladies.
No. Is it time to let ourselves degenerate into chaos for 10 minutes before we wrap up?
I don't know. Apparently I'm needed.
Oh, you've been summoned.
I've been summoned.
I think, well, I mean, there was some degeneration midway through when I did, in fact, lose my temper. That was not an act. I was reading through the notes that I had made, and I was like, this fucking guy.
Who was the guy who kissed the corpse? Was this Dickens?
No,
that was Pepys, wasn't it?
Pepys.
That deviant.
Yeah. Now, he was a deviant.
And he was a shit husband.
He was also a shit husband and spent more time bloody burying his parmesan during the Great Fire of London than making sure his wife and kids were all right.
He was a spectacular politician, though. I mean, he always plonked himself on the right side of things.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he made the Stanleys look like amateurs.
This is a man who literally celebrated the execution of Charles I. Was like, death to tyrants, and then he is on the boat to go
with Charles.
Like, monarchy is great. I'm very happy.
There was plenty of turncoats though at that point as well. You'd have to be that, or stand by your principles and like be oiked out, or just if they're
can change as often as required.
If they're going to keep changing their mind, why not?
It's me though. I'm sorry. What did Pepys do to a corpse?
Oh yeah.
You heard that correctly. You did hear that correctly.
Which one was it? It was Catherine of Valois. The corpse of Catherine of Valois.
It might.
Yeah,
I can't
so
remember now.
In Westminster Abbey, they used to open up the coffins for shits and gigs, and fuck knows why. And basically, he on his birthday decided to traipse round and pick up. He picks up her shoulders and kisses her mouth. I don't think so.
Nauseating.
It is not appropriate.
And he sort of said something almost quite romantic, didn't he? I can't remember what it was now. He was
however many years old that I'd first kiss a queen. Stop it. Get out at once.
Before we do our
immediately, if not sooner.
So Sam, who's Tudor Royalty Experience and the Tudor Queen's Wardrobe, is watching us on YouTube. I'll read her comment, and then we should mention what, because we're going to be doing something with Sam in April. So she has put up to a point, but if you have no integrity like an artist, you eventually get found out and will implode any success you may have gained.
Mayhap.
Yeah.
Mayhap indeed.
Indeed.
Perhaps the karma train will come and run you over.
Karma train. Yeah.
Choo choo.
Yeah.
And if you've been really bad, it'll reverse back.
We can, but
And we're driving it.
We're driving it. See, that's better than a Winnebago.
no, it's
We
not.
are
We're getting
doing the
Winnebago.
Winnebago. Yeah.
And what are we doing? What are we doing in April? Tell the tale.
Yes.
Tell the tale.
So April 16th, we're going to be going live with Sam, Tudor Royalty Experience. She's got a fantastic competition, which I'm actually really sad we can't we can't enter because we're picking the winners to win a bespoke Tudor gown. That's the first prize, and there's other prizes as well.
Gorgeous.
They are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So we're getting together, and Sam's going to dress us up, and we're.
I've never done that before.
Have you not? Oh, fantastic! Well, there you go.
I'm just going to flounce round all day.
Yeah, we're going to flounce around.
No change there, then, Catherine. You're always flouncing somewhere. Flounce.
Just like that. That's all I'm going to be doing all day.
Yeah.
That's it.
So anyway, we'll give you more details nearer the time. But if you look at Tudor Royalty Experience on Instagram, then I think Sam's put the details of the competition on there.
Join.
Yeah.
Do it.
Win the dress.
Do it.
Dresses. Yes. So there's more prizes as well, but they're all detailed. Aren't they? There's first, second, and third prize.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is. Yes. Sam says it's afternoon tea in Tudor gowns in a castle. Yes, it is. Yay!
In a posh castle. I mean, all castles are posh, but this is an extra posh one, I think.
I cannot wait. Put me in a frock.
Yeah. Right, Philippa, what are we doing next week?
Next week. All right. So we have decided, because we always have these ideas.
We've had an idea.
We've had an idea, everyone. Buckle up.
It was mostly these two, if I'm being honest. I was a bit spaced out.
Yeah, you have to go back. There's maths involved. We all lost the plot. Every 5th week, i.e. next week, we will be doing a recap of the previous 4 Gits. And we're going to start ranking them so that we have a league of Gits.
The League of Extraordinary Gits.
A league of deceased Gits we're going to have. So, and we've got a scoring system. This is where the maths comes in. We will sort it out by next week so we can explain it. But we're going to be using parameters of, was it personal, life, work, public life, and legacy. So that that because what we're finding is everyone is shades of grey, and so we can actually start to say, okay, brilliant personal life or crap public life, or whichever way around it is, and we're going to start ranking them. So that's going to be fun. So next week will be a bit of a recap of so we did Prince Albert, Robert the Bruce, Oliver Cromwell, and obviously tonight Charles Dickens. So we'll be doing a recap of them and asking for your input as well.
Yes, keep eyes peeled, because there may, if we figure out how to do it, there may be 4 polls. Polls are the word. Yes, no questions. Yes, no questions.
Yeah, there may be.
There may be.
We'll see. It'll be a surprise.
It may happen. It may happen in the room. Depends.
It may happen in the room. We might just take feedback but yes, we will sort it out by next week. But that's what we're doing next week.
It's gonna be sums. It's gonna be maths.
Philippa, on Instagram and on YouTube, there is a link tree. What's in our link tree?
Oh, you always ask me this. So in our link tree, we have
at least some of it.
Well, we have a link to our Substack. Now, Substack is our hub. That's where we will be putting all of what we do in terms of History After Dark, and we will be expanding on that over the next few months. So you can get a link to our Substack. Make sure you're signed up to that. It's free, and it means you get an email plunked into your email inbox with what we're up to. What else is in that? You can buy us a coffee, because we need to fund this Winnebago, and that's where we're going with it. Because
how else we talk to Catherine?
Only if they'll let me. They might not let me into the US. Then what are you going to do?
We're going to strap you to the bottom of the plane and then transfer you to the bottom of the Winnebago. All sorted. We've sussed it
in the hold.
We've sussed it out. So you can go through the link tree to buy me a coffee, or you can go straight to buymeacoffee.com/had podcast.
Okay,
I
so
do.
in the meantime, if you are only following us on YouTube, please go down to Instagram and follow us at history.after.dark because you get screenshots and things like that. You can also become a close friend, which you can do via
Ooh, yes.
buymeacoffee.com/
Don't we have
had
somebody
podcast,
to-
which is scrolling along the screen. So
Don't
yeah,
know.
buymeacoffee.com / had podcast. So you can become a close friend and you can get extra content over on Instagram.
You can
And we post
hear more depraved stuff from us throughout the week.
for varying qualities of history. And yes, and you get sort of extra screenshots and bits and pieces like that over on Instagram. If you're only on Instagram, you can also follow us. Please do like and subscribe and so forth. Down on YouTube, it's just History After Dark. You can follow us individually as well. So Philippa is British History Tours on Twitter,
UK History Tours.
yeah, UK History Tours, YouTube, and that thing, Instagram. Kat is Katrina.Marchant on here, Reading the Past, obviously on YouTube, and I'm the historical collaborator on here and on Facebook. Anything else, Philippa?
Can I just say, yes, I'm putting my hand up because I'm a child at school.
Yeah.
Last week we did say thank you, but Margie has become a close friend.
Thank you.
Barb, who's Mint Pixie, has given
Thank
us
you.
is also becoming a close friend this week, and Rebecca has just bought us all a coffee as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Rebecca.
everyone.
Thank you.
We massively appreciate it.
It's me. They're not
I
allowed
did
to
see
do
a comment.
war crimes worse than that.
It's time crimes.
It sort of is.
It's when we let her have her time turner. She did time crimes.
Yeah.
Crimes.
And the Federal Bureau, the FBTI, the Federal Bureau of Time Investigation, they found out. And if she goes to America, they will wear her like sooty. So
we're looking forward to that. So that's why we're still taking it.
I'm definitely not coming now. I tell you what, though, you can say as much as you like. I'm not allowed to go back in time. If I could go back in time,
No,
I would change that.
Fair enough.
well,
yeah, yeah. That I'm not telling you all. Anyway,
Okay.
they know. It's you don't want to know about it, but yeah, I would go back and change that.
we have seen a question. Are we going? When are we having a guest? When are we having a guest? When are we having a guest?
Well, so probably not till J.
Yeah.
We're having
Possibly for J.
a guest for J.
As a right of
We'll let you know. We'll let you know. We were hoping to get a guest every month, but that's not quite working out as planned. So probably
it's coming.
Yeah, they're definitely coming. We're getting them.
They're definitely
in
coming.
Advance. Well, of course.
Right.
Sorry.
I think we should go.
I'm not in
Shall I
charge.
count this out?
Yes.
I'm going to count it down. And that's going to be 3, 2, 1. Bye.